Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Astronomy on Tap Atlanta. I am your host, Justin Robinson, and tonight we have a very, very special flavor of Astronomy on Tap to give you. If you've noticed, all of the speakers that we've had in the almost 2 years that we've been running this series at Three Taverns, you've either heard talks from a person with a PhD or from a person who is working on getting their PhD. The PH in PhD stands for philosophy. So really, you've been hearing talks from philosophers or philosophers in training. And this man standing next to me has an introduction for himself already built. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Simmons.
All right. Yeah. Pointer. What's up? I am really happy to be doing this. This is like the first time I have been in front of an audience of absolute strangers to talk about crap that I like in like 20 years. So I am like a couple parts anxious. Yeah. Thank you very much out there, one clapper. Like you know how you get some of your ideas, your epiphanies in the shower? I had like 30 or 40 different ones over the past month while I was preparing for this. And then I realized, no, dude, you're talking about stuff. This isn't a stand-up show. So it's going to kind of turn into that because I am utterly confused right now. All right. So if you think I'm confused, I'm about to confuse y'all. Like Justin gave you a little bit of flavor on how this is going to diverge from your normal format because like through the how long have you been at this? A couple of years?
2 years in October.
2 years. All right. Oh, jeez. All right. The great karaoke, Mike, man. I gotta yell. So for 2 years, you guys have seen pretty much like the best and the brightest of like not only GSU but anywhere in the world. These guys are soft shoe it for a minute. All right, so as I was saying, the best and the brightest amongst the world, like a lot of these guys that you've seen talking, are going to go on to do wonderful things. And if they're PhDs that are stuck here, well, you're seeing them at their paramount. But but you're going from all of them to me because I felt you guys have had it far too good for far long. Behave. All right, so about me. There we go. I work for the Physics and Astronomy department as their PC Systems Specialist lead. I came into them from about 9 years ago. My anniversary was at the very start of July. And I had no academic background whatsoever. And I gained it through the TAP benefit, stands for Tuition Assistance Program, that has permitted me to take about 18 credit hours, amounts to about like 9 classes spread out over a year. So I've been slow boating this thing for 9 years, 2 classes per semester, and taking 2 classes during the summer. I do not advocate it. Those who know. And I am really close to graduating with a philosophy major and a history minor next year. Thank you. Let's not clap yet. Don't hex it. I'm not quite done. All right, so yep, you know, I'm up here dressed like a random humanities professor or maybe Satan's human resource coordinator. Trust me, I'm something far worse. I'm a philosopher. And my favorite thing is existentialism too, but I am not going to drop that on you, at least today. All right, so the other thing I was told actually, and this was dangerous. I asked Justin, is like, so what's like the audience? You know, what PG level are we at? And he says, oh man, no, somebody had an F-bomb in a slide. You're good. Well, you know the expression, cuss like a sailor? Come on, dude. Yeah. somewhere in here, my department chair has begun sweating. No, I will keep it under control. I have resolved to keep this PG-14, which limits me to 1 F-bomb, and I might not even get there. Goodness, this thing is finicky. There we go. All right, so the first thing to actually talk about is a semantic thing, because I am a goddamn philosopher, and boy, do we love haggling about the meanings of words. So everybody in here, generally speaking, has roughly about the same idea of what a scientist is and what science is for, based on like a very shared education that hasn't changed that much in the past 50, 75, 80 years. So like, for example, what's one thing you think that is important to science? Someone check something out for me. Curiosity. Falsifiability, says the frickin' scientist in the room. All right, we'll get to you later, Karl Popper. Say again? Spite? Oh, yeah. Wow, we're going right for the Renaissance era, aren't we? Okay. What? Measurements. Okay. Measurements does get like at a bigger umbrella category of like the importance of like method. And another thing that's important to science that may not be something that's like right off the top of your head when you think about science, but at the core of it, a really serious necessity for science, all of it, is truthfulness. Because whenever anybody sees anything proposed as, you know, related to science, scientifically like tested or verified or anything like that, there is a vibe of truthfulness to it. Like you're feeling like, okay, a lot of people worked on this in order to provide the truth, or the word gets abused and used incorrectly because of the importance of truth to the scientific process. And now the thing is that all this stuff that I just talked about with all of y'all's assistance, thank you kindly, is that these notions, these like packed in concepts that we have of what science is now, didn't really have the shape that it's got for us until about like 200 years beforehand. Now, to kick things off, the first thing to talk about is the root of the word science, and that's the Latin word scientia. And that just means knowledge or knowing. That's all it means. And that term scientist itself wasn't coined until like somewhere in the 19th century by William Whewell. And oh, I lost my place in my head. The oh, I knew this was going to happen. I totally knew this was going to happen. I was terrified of this. All right, so I'm just going to bring up the next thing. So in a way, tonight everybody in here is a little sciencey. My goodness. All right. So modern science started taking its shape. It became the thing that we all have in our heads, courtesy of, you know, the generational knowledge, transfer of information. Was really essentially gotten started pretty like the method part, the steps, the importance of replicability, the peer review part. All of that stuff was really laid out well in Francis Bacon's Novum Organum about 500-ish years ago. And Rene Descartes, who anybody who is in here of a similar philosophy background to me, probably just had their genitals crawl up into their throat. I promise I am not lingering on this dude. But you're welcome. Regardless of that, he still had, and this is why we're stuck with the freaking guy, he had some important contributions to the method of like responsibly doubting something by which you could develop a careful, logical strategy for being sure you're right. We're back to the importance of being sure of truthfulness. And then, definitely not amongst the least are fellows like Copernicus, Galileo, and Leonardo da Vinci, who were confronting taboos that were largely upheld by government and church alike, preventing science from advancing. Like these guys challenged the taboos of the time and just dragged us, dragged us out of the literal dark ages to get us to where we are today. All right, there we go. All right, now science's two prevailing components, which I did talk about a bit already. All right, we've got a big thing about science in general is typically that there is a goal to understand the natural world. When somebody is talking about science, it's usually in relationship to this is how something in the physical world straight up works. And the goal is to figure out if you're right or wrong and then move on to the next question. The second one is that method part. The method is critical to being sure that what you're getting is truthful. And other people need a shot at your statements as a scientist to make sure that you're checked. You're saying truthful things. I would hope that clicks with everybody's notions of science so far. Am I right? All right. No arguments yet? Mike, I know you want to pick a bone with me, don't you? All right, good. We'll talk later. That guy, I tell you. All right, so in relation to talking about how we have a very modern concept of society, of science that comes from a term that was really only coined 200 years ago, that really only started taking shape about 500-ish years ago, is it anachronistic then to take the idea of, well, who was a science way back whenever? Is that possibly anachronistic? This is typically a history kind of concern. History folks are usually worried about inappropriately projecting your circumstances into the background. Hoda. Sorry, I invited a lot of people and I love everybody. All right, so is it anachronistic? Well, here's the trouble. We are all creatures of this era and we cannot be taken out of it. We are hopelessly parts of our time. So usually the recommendation, this is also like an anthropological term. It's called bracketing. It's where what you try to do is to take yourself out of what you're viewing, try to remove your personal emotional content from what it is that you're looking at, and see things in the most objective manner possible, and maybe possibly catch a glimpse, or at least the idea of what it might have actually been like back then. But the anachronism part is not necessarily too much of a worry for us, because I think these terms can travel back in time pretty decently without causing us issues. So, a key thing about science in general is inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. All my philosophy people are like, oh God, not this shit again. All my science people are like, yeah, we read the definitions in a book 7 years ago, we're good. But no, like this is one of those important semantic things that's necessary for decompressing any kind of idea of who maybe kicked off science as far back as we've got recorded history. So, inductive reasoning is like, to start from the bottom here, it's the weaker form of reasoning. Now, it's not weaker in the pejorative sense. It's weaker in the more loose application. It's something that we do all the time. Like, how many of you guys have heard of the term heuristics? I mean, I know, yeah, that one's chucked around a lot in like both like corporate arenas, advertising arenas. It's like a big, fancy, polysyllabic 25-cent word that makes you sound like Mr. Big Shot with the freaking day of the week, word of the week calendar. But it's actually kind of a simple term. It's something that we as human beings do constantly. It's one of the things about our brain that makes us such amazing creatures over everything else that we're related to on the planet. Heuristics is just the process by which snap decisions get made really quickly. Like heuristics is all over artificial intelligence because they're trying to figure out how to get a computer to make good heuristic decisions like we do. Like our stuff comes from subconscious, which is relatively inaccessible when we're conscious, in our waking up minds, and a lot of that stuff rises up out of our subconscious in a completely rapid fashion to help us, like, zig when you should zig and zag when you should zag. And sometimes you got dyslexia and you zig when you should have zagged, and you're like, God damn it, GPS, why didn't you fucking help me? PG-14, that was my one. I had a hard time driving here. I'm going to take it out on you guys. But inductive reasoning is typically the result of a lot of that heuristic type access that we've got. It is like the probably kind of thinking, like, like I said, very general and loose. So let's get over to deductive reasoning, which is a lot more meticulous and methodical. All right. All right, so the really nuts and bolts technical way of putting it is that deductive reasoning is when statements gain validity based on gaining support from true premises. If the premises are all true, then the statement must be true. That is pretty much the easiest, lightest coat painting I can put on describing deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning composes some of the most nightmarish philosophy classes that you could take. And once again, y'all philosophy folks should thank me. This is about as deep as I'm getting into it. But we should be served by having a couple of examples to distinguish things. All right. My dog goes nuts for bacon flavored treats. They must be her favorite. That's it. I mean, that's a reasonable inductive estimation right there. Like, inductive reasoning typically doesn't go wrong for most of us. We make inductive reasoning estimations all the time, typically involving weather. Like, you wake up in the middle of July and you know it's going to be hot as a dog. So it's like, I better bring some backup deodorant. That's an inductively reasoned, like, type thing. Deductive reasoning can also result in little minor failures. The Atlanta Falcons are 11-4 and heading to the Super Bowl. They're totally going to win. The Atlanta Falcons are 28-3 in the lead in the third quarter. No way they're going to lose. Inductive reasoning has its, flaws. Deductive reasoning. It's usually like a syllogistic thing. I'm not going to beat you to death with these crazy philosophy terms. But a syllogism is usually like an ordered series of statements where you have a few premises first, and then it leads to a conclusion. Like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle absolutely loved these things. And I'm digging out one of Socrates' oldest ones. Here are the premise statements. I am human, and humans are mortal. Now, there's two things that are really important to premises. They need to be valid and sound. Now, a person saying I am a human, that's pretty unassailable. That's not hard to argue with. Humans are mortal. That's pretty much like not difficult to argue with. These two statements being generally true makes them very great premises to start out with, resulting in your conclusion, therefore I, as a human, am mortal. Reasonable enough. Oh, I did an existentialism. I'm sorry. Go away. I promised. All right, so we've got our inductive versus deductive reasoning, and these are the things that are basically the bread and butter, the meat and bones about how all science has been done from the beginning to today. to this very day. Really simple mechanics. Oh, shoot. Did I just shoot past that? No, I didn't. I hate this clicker. Justin, we're going to have words.
Get closer to it. It's over here by the window.
I know. I'm trying. Oh, my gosh. All right. Yeah, I know. I'm having a crisis up here. All right. The Malaysian trio. All right. Here's where we're going to start talking about the history part. The people that have been considered among the first scientists by a lot of recent thinkers. All right. Now, this is a group of fellows that worked with mostly inductive reasoning. So you're about to see some wild shit. Now, and saying that in relationship to guys who have been dead for 2,500 years, that's some pretty wild shit too. So now the Malaysian trio, about them, they were three of the earliest guys. These were the guys that were the philosophical heroes to the guys that usually are our philosophical heroes. Like they are Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. And these were the guys that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle looked up to the same way that we look up to them. They were separated by about 100, 150 years, though. And back then, they probably actually had writings of theirs. Like one of the complications, this is a historical context kind of thing, one of the complications that we've got with all of the pre-Socratic guys is that we do not have any primary sources on these fellows. They're all coming from somewhat shaky but generally agreed upon reliable sources about how these guys used to be and used to live. Now, if some of y'all are asking, well, where the hell is Miletus? Like, good question. I'm prepared to answer that. Now, you guys know where Turkey is. And Turkey is on, like, just to the east of Greece across the Adriatic, which was also called the Ionian Sea. And the Ionian coast of Turkey was colonized for hundreds of years by Athenian Greeks back in that time period. And the three fellows I was talking about were Athenian Greeks that were colonized and living over there. Like a lot of the major philosophy that carries forward all the way from antiquity to today was, when it's attributed to Greeks, it's also kind of attributed to the west coast of Turkey as well. So, about what these guys were estimating. The three of them, oh, that went ahead a little quick. Anyways, ignore that bullet point for a minute, and I'm terrified to touch this because I don't know if it'll work again. So, the RK is the thing that these three guys were primarily like working on in order to figure out why everything is. Why do we have so much variety? Why is stuff the way it is? And this idea of RK for them, they had three different ideas that usually narrowed down to one specific element that started it all, and magical unicorn fart or whatever, these elements would change into everything else through either energy or lack thereof or what have you. It was 2,500 years ago. They didn't have a lot to work with back then. All right. So Thales, that's the first guy on deck. Thales is kind of like the Johnny Appleseed and George Washington of his philosophical era. Now, that, like, what I'm saying is that he had a lot of embellishment attached to his reputation. Like, there was some stuff that we're fairly sure was just straight up made up about the guy. Like, it was alleged that he predicted earthquakes, and we can't do that. So Thales is a bit lionized in the historical records, but not for nothing. There's a lot of, like, invention. Like all of these guys were what were called polymaths. They had their fingers in everything, and they did invent some neat stuff here and there that I'm not going to get to because I was worried about time, and I don't know why I should have been. So Thales, sticking with the RK thing, um, his idea was that everything starts as water, and then water just becomes something else as everything else. It turns into air, it turns into rocks, it turns into stars, and probably some of that really wild mushrooms I think he was chewing on around the time. So his notion of how the world was that the world was, a big, never-ending plate off to the horizon in all directions, and that it sat upon water, and that the water of the oceans was pretty much like the RK water coming up underneath. This does not sound like terribly freaking scientific yet, does it? I promise. I'm getting to how this makes a little bit sense. But not before we talk about Anaximander, who probably had the absolute wildest shit out of all three of them. He had this notion called apeiron. And truthfully, I actually kind of like his idea a little bit better than the other guys. His idea was that there's just this somewhere that has a something that is everything, but it's not. Like the really super abstract wild shit. I mean, this dude is Kandinsky, way ahead of his time for philosophy. So his idea was that this like amorphous, like spherical, not spherical mass, like parts of it would separate off. That was his term. That they would separate off, and it would become a thing. Like, oh, look at that. There's a cow. Now we have cows. Oh, look, there's ground. Thank God that cow needed to stand somewhere. Like, oh, there's the water. There's the air. There's fire. Comes from the apeiron. And if anything, like they had no idea about the things that we know about outer space, the universe, as it were, the notion of the Big Bang. I kind of like this because this one sort of analogizes maybe to the Big Bang a little bit. I am sad that my philosophy professor that taught me this stuff is not here because she disagreed with me, and I wanted to hash that shit out in public. Anyways, her loss. Anaximenes. Now we're back to just, okay, it's air. And everything solid and liquid is just like a coagulation of it. And if you get right down to it, if you heat something or cool something down up enough, it's going to be liquid at some point. So he's a little bit like onto something, like not quite the same way that Thales was. But yeah, I mean, everything can be rendered gaseous with just the right temperature and a little bit of bravery. We're just fresh out of July 4th, so I know a lot of you guys know exactly the kind of courage I'm talking about. All right, now here's the significant part. Here's where these guys get considered the first scientists. Like these are amongst the first Western civilization guys that are like, on paper, that are in written history. Even if that history is contentious, we still got them. This is the big thing. These fellows were coming up with cosmogenic, start of everything ideas that weren't just boom, the divine said so, and now here we are. They were actually looking at nature and trying to reconcile a start that made sense with what we already have. In their cosmogonies, the gods came afterwards. They were just, better than us, apart from being capricious bastards that like to chain the one helpful guy up to a rock to have a bird eat its liver for eternity. Now that, I think, is some real bad management. But I bet he's a Six Sigma green belt. So the key thing, and this is perhaps a little bit of a romantic sentiment, but like it is a big deal that these were is extremely rare considering the time period. and considering the subsequent, 1,500, 2,000 years after them, that people were giving a shot trying to explain the universe without saying, they're for God, and if you argue with me, I swear to God, I can have you set on fire. Which happened a lot. All right, so there are contentions, very reasonable ones, to why maybe inductive reasoning is not a good place to pin the first emergences of science upon. One is, actually, no, I'm not getting to those bullet points yet. Forget I said that. All right, so F.M. Cornford was a professor. It's been literally a year and a half since I've read this article. So I think he was either Harvard or Oxford or some hoity-toity, super snooty school as a philosophy faculty. And he contended with the idea that the Malaysian trio were the first scientists because he felt that there was a lot more stock to be placed in the methodology, because where would we be at all without tight methods, without peer review, without all that stuff? So he felt that the guys that were probably the first real scientists were the physicians, because they worked very carefully with the finer details. Like they would review symptoms very carefully. They would keep meticulous track of the things they did to make things better, or especially if they got worse. He felt that doing things of that nature set the pace from which future science could appropriately flourish. The Malaysians were just guys pulling stuff out of their ass. That's largely the vernacular summary of what he felt the Malaysians' value were. And yeah, like I said, that's how he felt the physicians were among the first. Now, the nice thing about having Emma and Maura having their histories talks ahead of us too is because they show more than just physicians. We've also got way more ancient cultures doing really seriously intricate, careful measurement type stuff that's necessary in order to make buildings on the ground that lined up with solar and astronomical events. While we don't predict earthquakes very well, figuring out when eclipses are going to happen and what kind, that seemed like black magic to a lot of folks that weren't out there with their compasses and their abacuses and whatnot. So the folks that Mara and Emma talk about are also part of this continuum that support that the method is a really important component to our scientific heritage. All right, so I gave a nod to Maura and Emma, but I also have a nod to a few other folks who are definite contributors of note, at least on the methodology thing. All right, so we've got Imhotep, who is the first physician of record, and this was the guy that Dr. Cornford really appreciated. There's a lot about Imhotep that is still more or less referenced, at least in a methodological sense, in modern medicine these days. Zhang Heng invented the seismograph. You can't predict earthquakes, no, but can you set up a system to tell how freaking bad they are? Yes. And it's done on a logarithmic scale, and I hate that shit, but I respect what this guy did. All my science guys laugh because I go to their dissertations and then all of a sudden the log plots come up and I'm like, I'm talking to their parents like, trust me, I know how this shit feels. I'm with you guys. All right, Gay Hong. Now, this is the fellow responsible for making gunpowder. And you know, if this dude invented gunpowder and lived long enough that his name could be attached to the invention, he was careful. That is not for nothing. This dude is absolutely one of our shining, well, not that brightly, but a shining star of our scientific pedigree. Musa al-Khwarizmi wrote Kitab al-Jabr. This is the bitch that invented algebra. Not a fan. And I'm sorry, Musa, you're not a bitch. You're really important. But I'm sorry, you ruined so many high school years for me. All right. We have a lot of amazing feats done throughout history that were not done by aliens, to recapitulate a point from last week. Let's dispose of that right now. But there, because it's like all like in the past without documentation left behind, we're left like just in a raw amazement of what happened that we can't put names to. I am so bad at keeping this thing close to my face. I'm sorry. All right, thank you. All right, so the ancient Mesoamericans and South Americans, I'm calling back to Mara and Emma's speech talk. Last week, that was awesome. Indu Valley Civilization and Göbekli Tepe. Now, the Indu Valley Civilization, this was pretty amazing stuff. This was actually found, this civilization was rediscovered on accident during the time in India where industrialization was finally hitting, and they were laying down railroad tracks. And as they were laying down railroad tracks, they had to move a bunch of like bricks out of the way. And like some foremen came up and they're like, "Wow, these are some fine ass bricks. Who made these bricks?" And I'm like, "I don't know. They were here when we got there." So they start digging around more, and then they find a whole freaking city buried underneath foliage and vegetation. And then the archaeologists got involved and discovered that the Indus Valley Civilization, these guys were around well before a lot of our more modern civilizations. And they discovered that they had some incredible hydraulic, they had indoor plumbing. They had like boat launches where like they had dry docks where like they could drain out the water and work on ships. That stuff was unprecedented. Like they had the kind of advanced hydraulics that not even the Roman Empire managed to pull off. They had technology that they figured out on their own that wasn't seen again for 1,500, couple thousand years. And because of how much information was, there's so little we actually know about them. All the names of their sites and whatnot basically come from the Hindu language, and like they amount to things like we don't know, we don't know who these guys are, or some random city in the forest, So now, probably the crown gem of how the hell did they do that long ago? A lot of history pins the first agrarian settlements around 7,000, 6,500, 6,000-ish BCE. And then boom, we've got a major site with a huge megalithic building in it going as far back as like almost 10,000 years ago. Actually, no, that's like 1,100 years ago. Yeah, my math is, that's why I'm a computer toucher and not one of these guys. So this site, like, this is another one of those things like, oh my God, it had to be aliens. Like, no people could figure out how to move around big rocks. Are you crazy? But yeah, so like they thought this was a temple site, had a massive stone slabs that compose its structure, like put up in a manner that must have taken some real serious clever engineering to do. And that was a long time. Like a lot of archaeologists kind of lost their mind and had to restructure what they thought about civilization back then. It's still not even entirely clear whether this place was a temple or just a they also thought it might have been like a way station between points for like merchants, like but this was before the Sahara was completely destroyed by the like the Saharan pump situation. So there's a lot of thought that this place might have actually been a bit more settled and longer term, with lots more longer term residents. But it's really hard to figure that stuff out when all your stuff is like almost 10, 11,000 years old. But this just goes to show that like people have been doing really amazing, meticulous, scientifically related stuff that really implies some very tight methodology critical to it. So there are some objections to the objection, because everybody in science and philosophy loves continuous, unending loops of argument. All right, so the Malaysians may have been grand speculators pulling stuff out of their backsides, but like I had said earlier, their contribution was in disinvolving mythology and magic from their explanations. That was a huge step forward, and a very dangerous innovation through history, as it turns out. All right, and the original physicians, astronomers, and architects, they may have done some very specifically amazing stuff, but they weren't terribly concerned with how things fit into the bigger picture. Everything Imhotep did was in service to his gods. I probably have to give Al-Khwarizmi a little break here. I think he was a bigger picture thinker, but like a lot of these early physicians, early scientists, like particularly the Mesoamericans and the Egyptians, a lot of their conclusions about the scientific stuff that they came up with was, well, therefore, you know, a giant snake god that's going to eat everybody if the sun god doesn't keep shooting fireballs into his ass every century. Here's a calendar that keeps track of that. So there were, like, for as many of these ancient, amazing, historical, precise figures, they still were dealing with the challenges of the religious context that they were in. And sometimes, in some points, in a lot of, if not every culture, there's points where the religious contexts are stifling to the methodology because it doesn't click with the way that they like the message being sent. So my conclusion is that both perspectives are absolutely important. They're like, we are not independent of either of them. I don't think it's possible to state which is the first scientist by separating these concepts. So this is where I'd probably argue a little bit with Cornford and probably my teacher who's not here. It's your speculations. It's your wild, pulled out of the backside things that get set up to be tested deductively. So that's why we need the inductive stuff, even if it's a bit faulty and flawed. Everything's a bit horseshit at the start until you start working on it and breaking it down. Now, some of you guys remember a little bit from your history classes. Does anybody remember what good old phlogiston was? There's one person. Thank you. All right. Phlogiston was in like the late 18th, early 19th century, the prevailing theory of why shit caught fire. Everything in existence was thought to have some content, some amount of phlogiston in them. It was kind of like magic gasoline. And if enough phlogiston was present, it was going to burn more. So dry wood would really drive up the phlogiston quality, while wet wood didn't have that much phlogiston, you know. And eventually we came, oh my goodness, I always can remember this guy's name until I actually have to talk about him. Until the fellow that proposed oxidation. Lavoisier, thank you. Oh my God, I love you guys. Yes, please. Believe me, I am not going to let myself live this minute down for at least a week. Now, Lavoisier comes up with oxidation, and they're like, oh shit, that's right. Oxygen. That's awesome. Let's work with that. And I'm losing my. What about? Oh, thanks, Dad. He's not wrong. All right, so Lavoisier comes up with oxidation, and phlogiston is out. It became extremely irrational, but it was primary dominant science for about 100 years because it was the most reasonable inductive idea that they came up with. Anytime you look back into the past and think, my God, these guys were idiots, you got to remember, and this is the most charity I'll give that bastard Descartes, is that they didn't have the instrumentation, the quality of tools that we've got. They don't have the mountain of background transferred information that we've got now that makes all that old shit look like, man, Grandpa was nuts. Like, we have that knowledge now. We take it for granted. It's part of our subconscious. But back then, when they didn't have that figured out, they were making some pretty reasonable guesses with what they had at the time. And if they tried to look outside the confinement of the mores and the ethics involved with whatever religion that they belonged in, and that's where Descartes failed. Catholics are going to kill me after this. That's where I think it's understandable to give them a little bit of understanding and empathy, and still, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Respect their contribution and how they were a step that got us to here we are now. So yeah, I mean, basically, don't look back on those silly old guys and laugh at them too hard. But a little laughing's okay, especially when you look at the clothes they were wearing. Holy shit! All right, so careful and diligent attention to method, replication, peer oversight, and I think I used the wrong word there. Anyways, I'll fix that in post.
We don't have that kind of CGI budget.
Shut up. We don't have that kind of budget, period. All the things that make methodology important to truthfulness are like really incredibly important. They're a big part of it. So that's my conclusion, and that's my talk, and I'd love to take some questions. I made this last 50 minutes. I did not practice. I just raw dogged this presentation. Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna steal the first question.
You bet.
You said that one of the first people that you listed that contributed to the first scientist, his name was Imhotep?
Yeah.
All right. The only Imhotep that I know existed in ancient Egypt that had a problem with Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser. This is not the same. No?
Always one of them in the crowd.
Any questions?
Yes. Something valid? Hoda. Oh wait, there's a bunch of hands. I'll get to you guys. Hoda. Are you sure?
We'll start with the bottom floor so that I'm
Right. Convenience or death? I can project.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, do people ever argue, is it like an argument of like where like science is starting in general with this? Is, I guess like is all my brain thinking, because like do people make the argument not just about like the value being like inductive versus deductive, but like other values? Like is there other people in this like argument, I'm assuming, and like what are they,
Well, the class in question that I got this from, and this is again for the third time why I'm sad my teacher's not here, is because it turned into like that tastes great, less filling argument from the beer commercials of which one was more important to the other. And I'm fairly sure that sabotage was put out there by my teacher to entertain herself. Now, I don't know if this overlaps with the anachronistic concern or not, but like that's where I'm like, because I was thinking about the same concerns that you had, like, you know, it maybe not anachronistic, but maybe the term scientist just isn't right because, you know, these guys really weren't doing science, and that I think is more accurate to state. None of the folks that we're talking about actually did science, because science is the thing that we have that was only really coined and refined, coined 200 years and refined since the past 500. So it wouldn't be right to say that they were scientists. But I think that my thrust here is to state that, like, it is still appropriate to acknowledge their contribution into how we got to where we are today. Did I get your question all right? Sufficient. All right. I win. Next question.
Who's the folk there? You got some good sound. Go for it.
Yeah,
So
you bet.
you just said that you wouldn't count them as science. And I'm curious why. And I know you mentioned that it's, this is something that in your opinion has been developed in the past couple of centuries. And I'm wondering why is that specific instead of an evolving term? Because you were like, all right, we're referencing what was said before, how when you look back on the old guys, you can't just shit on them because they're doing the best they can.
Right. Yep.
And how, in that sense, while taking that idea, how do you reconcile that with excluding these folks as scientists?
It's not really like an exclusionary matter. It's more. It's a bit of a. It's strongly a semantic type issue. And the things that a lot of the questions that you posed enter into a philosophical arena that I know my cohort here also hates, which is the philosophy of language. I know it's fun to talk about, but it's really, really scary when people start drawing lines in the sand and stating, like, if you don't agree with me, I'm afraid you're going to get out of my house. But no, like, the key thing is that in the capacity that they were operating, in the eras that they were doing what they were doing, it's not science because it's like the word science with the meanings that we've got right now. It didn't exist back then, and like they weren't really like, that as much as Gay Hong survived long enough to get his name in the books, he definitely wasn't running from Novum Organum, which is where a bulk of the methodology that makes someone a scientist by that current terminology it would be. Like, do they approach it? 100%, absolutely. That's part of why I wanted to talk about this thing, but they aren't scientists because that's a now term that doesn't describe what they were doing back then.
We didn't even have peer review until like 100 years.
Oh, hell no! You just had to live.
Yeah.
You had to live and get paid by an important noble and not piss off the bishop. Those are good ingredients.
That's a very important part.
Yeah.
I have a question. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So my question is, I guess you can hear me. So my question is, so then with respect to her question, my question is then, well, then would you agree with the statement that maybe some of these earlier thinkers may have had elements of the scientific method, but didn't have the full thing, and the full description of what it means to be a scientist and to do science is to not only have conjectures about what you think that it's about the natural world, but also the ability to derive empirical facts?
Oh, that's your question?
That's my question. What do you think?
Can you? I'm not sure I get your question. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought sometimes I get
He just got his PhD. Let him have his moment.
No. Like, this is a dude I've gotten so many lunches with that, like, he really enjoyed his philosophy classes, and he beats me up with that stuff every minute he gets. It's been great because he's one of the few people that doesn't like shrivel, wither, and walk out of the room. Like, when I started telling my faculty 7 years ago, I decided on a major, and they're like, "Oh, what did you pick? What did you pick?" And I'm like, "I'm going philosophy." They're like, "Oh, do you want fries with that?" I'm like, "No, I said philosophy, not English literature." God.
Are you asking whether or not
My
these old
question,
guys?
my question is this. It's almost two parts. One,
Okay.
do you think these guys had elements of the scientific method in their respective parts and what they were working on? Like maybe like they had the posing a question about the natural world part, but didn't have the empirical way to go investigate it. And the other guys had maybe were looking at trying to do deductive reasoning or about whatever the positions, but they weren't really asking like deep questions about natural phenomena.
Okay, so your question is like, if these guys aren't scientists, did they have elements of the science that we've brought us nowadays? 100%. And like, I think that's the overall arc of everything I talked about, is that like we are here, we have the final. Well, it's not the final form. That's a bit right. No, it's no. We have the current form, the final shape of the current form.
The concept of a final.
One thing philosophy taught me is I hate absolute statements and I don't want to make them. But the current shape of what we have science now are all like, you know, these are like the busted parts of Legos all over the floor that were generally gathered together by those like in Renaissance era and, you know, 19th century folks that, you know, turned into what we've got now. So the answer to your question for me is 100% yes. Absolutely. It's what they gave us. It's their gift to us in a legacy kind of fashion. Oh,
Let's give Jeremy one more round of applause. We'll give him
that time.
some general updates for astronomy.
Wait, stop.
Ooh, oh, go for it.
It's our buddy Karl Popper, everybody. Give me the clicker.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just extend your arm.
Got it. All right. Karl Popper. He's the falsifiability buddy, Kyle. What's up, Karl? Or falsifiability, I'm sorry. What? Oh no! What's happening, Karl? That was for you, Emma. I had joked last week, like, oh my God, I'm so intimidated. You guys had these awesome, hilarious, like aliens sucking people into the sky things. Like, what am I going to do? Make a video of like Karl Popper getting sucked into the sky by aliens? And then I'm like, well, shit, I got to put my money where my mouth is now.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to next week. July is a back-to-back event extravaganza. So this was our first event of July. The second event of July will be a talk about basically a spark notes of everything that's happened in the universe. Until the morning to the talk given by Mahir Patel, that's sitting right next to me, who is a astronomy PhD candidate at Georgia State University. So please follow our Instagrams to be kept up to date with all of our events, and please be sure to come next week for our sequel to this event. It's been not the best weather today, but we've brought the telescope, so if we can see something out there in the sky in the next 30 minutes, we'll have the telescope out there. So thank you everybody so much. Please enjoy some excellent beer.
Thank you.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
I don't understand what your beef is with Popper. I don't really get it.
You'd have to be there. Like, good, thank goodness. Like, on what? Like, on what point?
We don't know enough about what they did. I think that they had their method. They had to reproduce the solar house. You know, it didn't work the first time. They had to probably ask the guy to involve to take a look at it. I think they did this. They just didn't write it down.
Yeah.
We know.
Right. They had a method, but it wasn't necessarily the method that we've got now. Like, that's the key